This is 9/11 Freefall.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of 9/11 Freefall. I am your host, Andrew Steele. Tonight I'll be joined by Josh Ewing. He's one of our great volunteers here at Ae911 Truth. Got a great voice. You hear him, he actually sounds like a radio announcer when he speaks. Maybe he should take over this show. I don't know. But he's one of the guys that helped me with the mailing. He hunted down the addresses of the people at NIST and FEMA who put out the official reports, kind of key people to be getting the Beyond Misinformation booklet out to. So he'll be talking tonight, talking about evidence from his perspective, what woke him up, the typical questions that come in one of these interviews, and his own view on what needs to be done and how we can wake other people up. He focuses a lot on military outreach. That's his big goal in his activism. So he'll be explaining why that's so important. So I'll be playing that in a few minutes. I got a mixture of being stoked and a mixture of being kind of irritated right now. I just recorded an intro for this show, and then the microphone didn't pick it up. I got to get some new podcasting software. So it's always tough to get that same spark and lift in your voice that you had before when you did it all exuberantly in the previous take. But I'm going to give it another shot here again, and I talked in the previous take, and I will now, about the fact that I went to the city council near me here in Walnut Creek last night. Me and Dale Pierce. You remember Dale Pierce is one of our great activists today, Ae911 Truth also. He does a lot of firefighter outreach. And Ae911 Truth put out a action alert several months ago. Well, actually, it wasn't even several months ago. It was just a few weeks ago. But anyway, I digress. So we went to the city council and I read the speech put out by Ae911 Truth, the standard 3-minute speech that you can print out and read yourself. And Dale gave his own speech as a firefighter, and we knocked it out of the park. We weren't allowed to show the video because we hadn't gotten it pre-approved, and they wouldn't even take the time to look at the 1-minute video and pre-approve it on the spot for us. But that's okay, because when we went up there and we talked about physics and common sense and this third building, which I could tell by the looks on people's faces, a lot of them had not even heard about before, we had every eye in the room on us. And that's a significant thing. I mean, I don't know if you've ever watched these city council meetings or even any kind of big legislative body where people come up and speak. Someone might be talking to the microphone, but people are having their own little side conversations, shuffling papers, whatever, not always paying attention. But when we spoke last night, every eye in the room was on us. Everybody was interested. You could tell. And so there was also architects and engineers in the audience. They were talking about some kind of water issue. So we did an outreach to other A's and E's as well last night by doing this. And it's so simple. It is so simple and so empowering to go up there and do that. I don't see why anybody can't do that. And I know it takes momentum, it takes inertia to go from doing nothing to doing something. But once you take that first step and see how simple it is, then there's no stopping you. And that's how we're going to treat it. Because we're not going to just stop with where we went last night. We're going to keep on going. And I compare this to a football team. Right, so we did Walnut Creek this week. Next week, we're going to go to some other city. We haven't decided that yet. And we're just going to keep on going, playing each place, playing each game, until we get to the playoffs and eventually the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl being us speaking in front of the Congress as they deliberate on having a new investigation into Building 7 and the Twin Towers. I know that day can happen. All right, if we believe it can happen, it will happen. We make things happen ourselves by just showing up, doing this work. And there's no reason you can't have fun doing it. I mean, we made a whole night out of it. So, if anybody wants to do this outreach, if anybody wants to participate in this important action in their local communities, and you don't have to just go to your city council. You can go on tour in your area as well. All right, you don't have to actually be from that town to present something to the city council. If you've got a bunch of towns in your area, which this is the United States, so there's towns everywhere, you can make your own tour, take the same speech that's already been written for you, that's already been vetted and fact-checked and presented, that you don't even have to change, and just go from town to town and deliver it. All right, like the old days that you see in movies where you have the guy with the tricorner hats going from place to place reading a proclamation. You can do that. All right, and if you need help doing that, if you don't have that action alert put out by Ae911 Truth several months ago, you can contact me, Steele at Ae911Truth.org. I will get it in your hands. I will email it back to you. I will coach you. We set up a special email for people to be coached in doing this, City Hall at Ae911Truth.org. You can write to that, and I will help you through this process. And it's so simple. That's why I committed to it, because it's just so simple. If you need a confidence boost, if you need advice on how to read it, or how to get prior approval for showing the video, which I guess we need help with too, because we weren't allowed to show the video. But we will in the future, so we learn as we go, right? But we will help you out with that. I will help you out with that. So contact me if you need that information again, if you need the Building 7 clip again. But the other side is counting on us, feeling helpless, feeling like we can't do anything, like we can't have any impact. And it's just by doing simple things, having these conversations and getting, breaking the rest that we're in, the mental slumber that we're in, tearing ourselves away from the TV for a second to go down to our local city hall and read a speech. That's going to be what gets the truth exposed. That's what's going to create that viral effect in the real world where all of this stuff really matters. So again, Steele at Ae911Truth.org if you need a copy of that speech, and or City Hall at Ae911Truth.org, that'll work too. But just get out there and do it, because we're doing it, and we're going to keep on doing it. We're going to try to hit like 40 cities. I'm psyched about this. This is going to be something else. All right, before I play my interview with Josh Ewing, we're going to do what we do every week. We're going to take 10 seconds of silence to remember the victims of 9/11 and their families and all the people who died in the wars that followed 9/11. We're going to do that beginning now. And that's 10 seconds. Joshua Ewing is a student of environmental science. He's a solar system installer and an advocate of veteran outreach for the 9/11 Truth movement. He currently volunteers with Ae911 Truth. He's doing a lot of great work with us, and I'm happy to have him here on the show today. Joshua, welcome to 9/11 Freefall.
Beautiful. Yeah, man, thank you for having me. Absolutely.
So I want our audience to know more about you before we start getting into 9/11 and all that stuff there. Tell us more about you beyond the intro that I just read.
Well, Andy, I mean, I guess to be honest with you, there's not a whole lot more to tell. I'm a laborer overall. I do work in the solar industry with a close friend of mine, and we install solar systems. At least here in the Northeast, you can only do it about 6 or 8 months out of the year. In the wintertime, I try to find as much inside work as I can. And typically that involves, indoor painting or something of the like. But other than that, I'm a student of environmental science at Hudson Valley Community College, small town just outside of Albany. And, I guess that would probably encapsulate most of me right off the bat. I'm a pretty simple guy.
Well, I remember, and you were doing some 9/11 Truth-related outreach already at your college even before you came across our path. How did you wake up to the 9/11 evidence, and what got you involved as an activist?
Yeah, I still... I still go over that whole issue in my own mind sometimes. It's not a very exciting story, but it's very simple, really. I would say about 2 years ago, it was a lazy Sunday afternoon, and I had the day off, and I was just kind of surfing across the web and looking for something to entertain me, more or less, for a little while. And I ran across explosive evidence. I'm sure your listeners are familiar with that documentary produced by Ae911. And so I gave it a shot. And I sat back and I watched it. And, what attracted me the most was, I've heard some really, really far out explanations for what may have happened that day. But the architects and engineers are the only group, really, that I've come across, maybe one or two others, that really had anything to back up what they were presenting, evidence-wise. And to be honest with you, it took me, even after viewing explosive evidence, it took me a solid 2 years. Okay, so during that time, I would literally, I'd wake up some mornings and I'd think about it, think about what I had saw, and try to assimilate it. And right about the 2 year mark, I finally woke up one day and I said, I got to take a second look at this. And I went back, and then I really started doing my homework. And that's when things started to set in for me. Because once again, AE, the evidence that they present is just so clear and so evident. It's I owe a lot to those guys, man. They woke me up in a number of ways, but it did take some time, So that's the quick answer before I start rambling on you.
No, that's good. I mean, just for yourself, what convinced you most? Like when you're waking up in the morning and you're thinking about this and it keeps on coming back to you, what's really sticking out in your mind saying, wow, I didn't know about this, or I need to look into this little piece of it even further?
There was two things in particular that really stuck with me. And I'm sure your listeners are familiar with, of course, Building 7. I was one of those that was old enough to recall where I was and what I was doing on September 11th. But I didn't really understand what was happening that day. I was only 18 years old, and I didn't have a great appreciation for what was really going on. And so when I saw the documentary that AE had put out, I had never heard of Building 7. Okay, so that was the first piece of evidence. The second thing that kept sticking with me, and it still does to this day, because, sometimes this subject gets so heavy and you find yourself, almost doubting yourself, or at least I do, sometimes. And when those moments come up, I just pinch myself and I remember, if you go back and you study the collapse of both of the towers themselves, the actual visual evidence, the video footage that we have, very well documented from a number of angles, what you'll notice is that a number of multi-ton beams are being projected upwards and outwards, and the whole time forming arcs, and here's why this stuck with me. I know I'm long-winded, but I have always struggled with math, okay? Even though I'm a student of science, I've always struggled with math. But one thing I do know is that the explanation we've been given is that apparently fire and gravity did this. Okay. Well, if that's the case, last time I checked, gravity does not project things upwards and outwards. It pulls them down at a very consistent rate. And, so getting back to my original point, when I saw these images of some of these pieces of metal from the towers being projected once again upwards and outwards, it was just stunning. Because that's when I realized, this is real. This isn't just some video I'm seeing online. And that's when I got motivated. I wanted to make contact with AE, and it wasn't long before you guys had me on the phone. I couldn't believe it. You guys made it real very quickly, and I've been hooked ever since.
Absolutely. Anybody that wants to volunteer, we get in touch with them, and you've been a tremendous asset. You got a great voice to bring to the table, just not just with your physical voice, but just also just the stuff, ideas that you have, that you contribute, the fact that you helped work on the mailing that just went out. We'll talk about that in a few minutes, but you haven't just kept it confined with talking to us here at AE. You've talked to some other people, just had some experience reaching out, conferring with campus newspaper office, other people. Any experiences stick out that you want to share with the listeners? Anything that you've observed in your interactions with the general public on this issue?
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing that comes to mind is for those of your listeners that are maybe just starting to wake up to this issue. I don't often give advice, but I guess I'm going to in this instance. The only thing I can say is that although you may find yourself frustrated and maybe even a little bit keyed up over the issue, if you know what I'm talking about, it is still best to approach any given audience, anybody you're trying to talk to the subject about, that you stay level-headed and you do your homework and you stick to the facts. Okay? This is a very difficult subject for a lot of people to talk about for a very varied variety of reasons. And it's my experience that it's better to go to them and just simply ask them simple questions to get them involved in the conversation. Don't go to them and tell them what you think happened. Do your homework and, like I said, stick to the facts. Because otherwise, in my experience, people are turned off very easily. Because when I first woke up, I was very excited, and it was a hard time, man. I think just like a lot of other people, I went through a very wide range of emotions, and it was not the easiest experience. But I came out the other side, I think, a better person. So for those of you that are out there trying to talk to people, just stay cool and, like I said, do your homework and stick to the facts. And don't speculate.
No, I mean, exactly, because ultimately it's the facts that are going to trap the other side, as we've seen on the C-SPAN Washington Journal show when we ask congressmen very pointed questions about this evidence, and all they can do is name call and call you a conspiracy theorist. But the three-dimensional effect of that kind of activism is that the outside world sees this interaction and says, well, why are you calling him that? He asked you a very specific question. Why can't you answer it? This is basic ninth grade physics we're talking about here. This is stuff that you can observe and comment on even if you're not a scientist or an architect or an engineer. And so sticking with the science is what kind of like what I call the columbo approach. You stick to something that somebody can't just weasel out of. You're absolutely right, and that's why we take this direction and avoid the speculation, avoid the name-calling, the finger-pointing, all of that stuff. And that is what has gotten us to reach so many eyes and ears, and now we got the booklet, so many people buying copies of that all over the country and even in other countries, too. So, right now you're I think 4 years younger than me. So you were 18, I was 22 or 23 when 9/11 happened. And you're in college, so you're an older student in college. Do you think there's a difference between people who are 30 and over right now, and then the average college-age kids, the people going to college right after high school? Do you think there's a difference between those two groups when it comes to being receptive to this issue?
Well, Andy, that's a great question. And actually, I've asked myself the same thing several times. And to be clear, I don't have a very direct answer for you, because what I've noticed is that I've tried to talk to a number of different people from a number of different age groups, and more often than not, the response is very similar. Okay, they are rarely up to date on the subject, or have done very little research on their own. And once again, that comes from all over the map, anywhere from the ages of 15 to 55. Okay. And so, yes, that's a challenge that I think anybody that's out there trying to help educate the public has to overcome. There's really no two ways around it. It's something that we all have to deal with. I don't have all the answers, and I don't know how to overcome it. And I haven't found any particular tool that works best for any one generation. But I find it very interesting, to this day. And one other thing I would say is, when you get out there and you're talking to people, if you find yourself encountered by somebody who's trying to shut you down, particularly without a lot of conversation behind it, the one thing I've noticed is that the majority of the people who do try to shut you down are the ones who have done the least amount of research. So, I know it's not the easiest subject and everything, but it doesn't take much to realize all of the holes that are in the official story. And that's kind of where I was going with my earlier explanation. I've always been bad at math, but even I get this. Okay? This doesn't take a whole lot. And so to answer your question, I just take it one step at a time, and it doesn't matter what generation I'm talking to. I do my best not to come on too heavy, and I ask questions as opposed to telling them things, because asking questions appears to be what gets them to, I suppose you'd say, get their own wheels turning, and from that point, they, I think, can make more progress on their own than I can just hand to them. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, I just go back and I say, do your own research. You don't have to believe me. I mean, this stuff is not hard to find, and that's what I find so astounding about it to this day. The average individual can go out and do a significant amount of research and substantiate themselves fairly easily, and all they need is a laptop. It's not like this stuff is classified. This stuff is all out there in the open and in the public domain. And that's what amazes me to this day.
Well, what gets me about this debate, if you and me were having an argument or debate about something as silly and mundane as who was the quarterback for the New York Jets in 1983, and you thought it was one person and I thought it was another person, we could look that up and then it's not that big of an issue. Whoever was wrong could just be like, oh wow, I didn't know that, sorry, and then move on with life. It's not something that you've staked a lot of energy and your personal soul into, and so there's a lot of people who have taken a stance on this, and people who have been attacking us for years, and people also on our side who've been passionate about this issue, who have invested so much energy into the debate that it's hard to just look at it from a scientific perspective for many people, to just look at the facts and let the chips fall where they may, because there's actually repercussions here. It's more than just looking in a book and seeing who was quarterback of the Jets in 1983. It's, wow, if this is true, then we got a serious problem here in this country. And one side that I blame in this, I blame the corporate media for viciously attacking anybody who raised these questions in the very beginning. Because obviously then people who are getting attacked, their defense mechanisms are going to kick in and they're going to shout back, and it just raises the level of discussion to an argument, and then it's hard to arrive at any kind of truth. And then outsiders watching this don't want to participate because nobody wants to get involved in anything negative, anything that's going to make them angry or bum them out or whatever, and they get caught up with distractions. Looking at things that make their lives more fun, more interesting in the sense of filling their current moment with amusement. And that's the problem that, as I see it right now, is that there's just, the debate has been taken to such a level of discussion and shouting in the past that people maybe are afraid to jump into it and be part of it. What do you think of that?
Well, it's interesting because I believe I know what you're saying. For the few that I can get to even engage me in the slightest, without even being able to substantiate themselves a lot, they tend to still take a very strong stance. And that could be a difficult thing to overcome, especially if you've done your homework. You get frustrated sometimes and you think to yourself, well, this is a no-brainer. But, it's important to step back and stay cool and find a more effective way to communicate with whoever it is that you're trying to talk with. Okay? And that situation is going to vary from person to person. There's no one solid formula that's going to answer that for you. The other thing I've noticed is that if there's any variation, I mentioned earlier that I've talked with people from various generations, being from anywhere from 15 to 55. If they're from the younger generation, you got to keep in mind that they were probably 5 years old when 2001 happened, or 9/11 happened, and so it's not exactly in the forefront of their minds, and so to bring it up at all, in a lot of cases, is new to them. For anybody to even approach the subject is new to them. I have found, anyways. And that is the case in 99% of the people I talk to, especially from that generation. So you have to approach it very gingerly, and once you get the subject opened up, once again, this is what drew me to architects and engineers, you have to stick with the science first, because that's the best gateway to get people's minds opened up. And then after that, there's so much context that and so much content that AE doesn't even approach that the average individual can go out and verify for themselves on this issue. And to get them in that place, though, to get them in the right mindset, first, I believe that you got to start with the science, get them through that, and then finally their own wheels start turning, and you can finally start getting them to do their own homework. And that is my approach with veterans in particular, or at least that's the approach I'm trying to take. If you can get these guys and gals turned on and start getting them to do their own homework, well, if we can get them on our side, we got a good thing going.
You're right. And, you talk about people being 5 years old when 9/11 happened, and, people could say, oh, technically they were alive at that time. But, technically I was alive during the LA North hearings, but I just looked at that as something that was interrupting television. I didn't care what was going on. Pay attention, And, but, it'd be like if you're older and kind of coherent and aware of what's going on, you might, the sky could suddenly turn red one day, and people would be talking forever about how that changed their whole lives and changed their whole outlook on things because the sky turned red. But somebody born with the sky being red would just be like, well, yeah, the sky's always been red, I'm using a fantastic situation to describe what happens as things get more set back in the past, more set back into history, as part of history. For a lot of us, World War I, World War II were things that happened in black and white, and even though our intellect knows better that the world wasn't black and white, you still sort of imagine history taking place in that context, and it's just something that's been over and done with and not really affecting your current life. Even though it has affected your current life, it doesn't feel like it's affected your current life because you're just kind of born into this situation. And even when you're really young, when something happens, if you're not really paying attention to the world, you're a little kid. Most little kids think that the adults pretty much have these things handled. I can see how that would be difficult to kind of look back and be like, oh, why is this my problem? So that's a challenge we got to overcome. You brought up the military, and I wanted to talk about this because you've been a strong advocate of reaching out to the military, and you're talking about taking some steps to do that. Why do you think that's a good idea, reaching out to our veterans and military people?
Well, to lay it all on the table, it's really quite simple, because I've given this issue a lot of thought, and personally, I'm of the opinion that until we get men and women in uniform, particularly active service members, out and about, on the streets, anywhere we can, trying to educate the public, that there's not, I don't know how much ground we can make if we don't get them on our side, is the long story short. Okay, the impression that I get is that the vast majority of the public is not only unaware of these issues, but even when you try to talk to them about it, they're not fully cognizant, and a lot of them just aren't thinking. And when they see people out on the streets trying to talk to them, I visited New York City here this past September on the anniversary, and I noticed that, there's a bunch of folks out there for the Truth movement trying to get information out. They're passing out flyers, this and that. They're doing what they can, and I applaud them for that. But you got to understand that the average individual visiting New York City sees hundreds of other individuals trying to pass out flyers. Okay, and I guess what I'm trying to say is that until the Truth movement gets the men and women in uniform that literally had to go to war over this lie that we've all been force-fed, I don't know that the public is ever going to take us seriously, and that we need them on our side. And that is our ticket, because we, as a movement, the entire any organization that's had anything to do with this attempt to educate the public has had a major downfall when it comes to getting any kind of mainstream media coverage. The way I see it, the mainstream media is going to have a very difficult time ignoring the efforts of the Truth movement once we get men and women in uniform backing us up. Okay? And when I talk about them out there in the streets just handing out flyers, that's just the beginning, at least the way I see it. But they, I suspect, will be more apt to listen to our veterans than they will just the average individual. Okay? You may have done your homework, and you may know what you're talking about. But the fact of the matter is that the Truth movement is pushing the biggest rock up the biggest hill in human history. I mean, we picked a hell of a problem to try to solve here. And I don't think we're getting too far without our service members on our side. And we need them in uniform, in the streets, helping us out. And that goes for any one of the military service members, firefighters, police officers, every one of them. We need them all, you know. And so that's what I try to spend my own personal efforts reaching out, you know, to get their attention, because I believe that they will have the greatest impact on the rest of the public. That's
that's absolutely true, and I've thought this myself many times. I think that in many instances throughout history, when people are trying to make change, one of the best things they ever did was getting the military on their side, because you put this in the minds of the service members, you know, you're planting that seed, and so, you know, they may at first dismiss it, or they just may not think about it, at least openly, too much, but that's going to roll around in there. It's going to roll around as they start to see how they're being used, and what the whatever conflict we're getting involved with now, make them start to question. And so right there, you've done a great bit of activism by getting them on our side. And this government is more accountable to the soldiers than they, at least in their own minds, than they would be to the regular citizens, because they're the ones that are being asked to go die allegedly for our freedoms. So no, you're absolutely right. I'd like to see us doing more veteran outreach, and who knows what the future may bring here. Not just veteran outreach, but active service members too. You mentioned the media, and I've never really heard you comment on this when we've talked privately, so I'm going to ask you to do it publicly now. What is your take on the media's treatment of this issue? What's your insight on what you observe?
Wow. Shameful comes to mind. I'm actually, although I'm a student of environmental science, one of my other personal endeavors is actually is journalism. And I'm a writer in my spare time, and I appreciate nonfiction. I love the process of doing research and assimilating information and putting it in words that other people can understand easily. And so when I think about the mainstream media's coverage of this issue, like I said, the first word that comes to mind is just shameful. It's absurd. What I've observed here, I don't know. It's difficult to comment beyond that because there is so little coverage of the issues that the architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth cover. I wake up every day wondering why the information that they've put forward is not making the front page of every paper that's still in print, and on the Good Morning America version of every local news network in America. I mean, I don't know if your listeners are old enough to remember what happened during the next 2 weeks after 9/11, but I mean, the airports were shut down, the banks were shut down, the NFL was shut down, everything went to pieces. I mean, and this country was in a patriotic rage for, the better part of 14 years, and we're still trying to drag ourselves through it. The idea that we can't put these simple questions out there and ask for a new, proper criminal investigation, which in my opinion was never conducted to begin with, is absolutely absurd. And it's one more thing that it makes it difficult, to speak to other people about. And I've taken to, a tactic, and I realize I'm kind of working in reverse. It doesn't work for everybody, but I've had some success with simply starting that conversation with that very first question: would you support a criminal investigation? Particularly with vets, because a lot of times they look at me and they say, well, are you suggesting one was never conducted? And yes, that's exactly what I'm suggesting. There is to be fair, there were follow-up investigations, particularly with the 19 accused hijackers and Osama. Okay, not exactly in AE's territory, but I'll stretch out a little bit here. There was follow-up investigations, but I have yet to see one document that directly connects any one of those 19 hijackers or Osama with the crimes that they have been accused of. Not one. Okay? And if somebody out there that's listening could please email me that, I would be very grateful. But I suspect you're going to have a very difficult time.
Right. Now, it's funny you talk about how the world was right after 9/11 happened. I don't know if I've ever told this story on the show before, but I remember the day after 9/11. We watched it. Classes got canceled at the college where I was going, and watched it throughout the day. Went to bed eventually, probably with the TV on. But I remember I turned on the radio the next day. Now we had to go to. They were only giving us one day off for it. We had to go to classes the next day, and I turned on the radio, getting ready, dressing, and I was listening to the announcer that I normally listen to, and I just remember I tuned in right in the middle of a rant. It was like he was going nonstop, breathlessly for an hour. And he was just listing off countries, saying, you know, France, we saved your ass in World War II, so if you don't like what we got to do, then shut up. China, you're communist, shut up. England, we saved you too, just going through this whole litany of, like, any country that could possibly have some issue with, like, us going and avenging 9/11. And it sounded like somebody, you know, because, you know, the radio, normal corporate radio, sounds very organized. You have a structure to the show and commercials, and this sounded like some madman had just broken into the radio station with a gun or something and taken it over. I was like, wow, I have never seen anything like this before in my life. And honestly, I've never seen anything like that afterwards either. It was just for that whole, it was like America was in absolute chaos and had been shut off, or certain aspects of it had been shut off for that entire week. So, no, I mean, you're absolutely correct in how everything changed, and it's one of those things you really had to experience to get. So if anybody's listening to this broadcast in the future, I hope that you never have to go through anything like that yourself, but know that as this piece of eyewitness testimony from that time in history, it was really something to see there. So you commented on the media. We've had a lot of congressmen, too, dismiss their responsibility to this issue. A couple of years ago, we asked my congressman up in New York, Richard Hanna, to ask NIST to test their dust samples for incendiaries or explosives, and they refused to even ask NIST to do that, and didn't even give us initially they just sent us a standard form letter that didn't even say anything about our issue. I had to press them just to get a one-sentence email from his office. And a lot of congressmen have taken this stance. They don't want anything to do with this. They're afraid of dealing with this. We have them openly speculate, oh, maybe they cut corners in construction. I don't know if that's a fact. Chris missed that on C-SPAN. I don't know if that's a fact, but maybe they did, you know, and they get away with this. Nobody presses them on it. What's your comment on Congress's refusal to do anything with this and you know, shameful tactic of turning their back on scientific evidence?
Well, I can tell you from personal experience, I had actually never written my congressman until I woke up to the 9/11 issue. And I wrote my congressman online. It did not take long, and I suggest all of your listeners do exactly the same. And the response that I got back was so generic and so vanilla and plain, and it was a very good dodge, is all I can say, or not even a good dodge, you know. My congressman is Chris Gibson. I'm in the 19th district of upstate New York, and he did write me back. It took about 3 weeks, and he said, you know, basically, I'm a veteran, and I understand your concerns, but we have to keep national security in mind. And that was pretty much the end of it. There was no real attention to the question that I had asked. And at the time, my specific question was referring to the 28 pages. Okay? And I was advocating that they be released. Okay? And I understand that those might not, that one issue may not be the key for the truth movement, but it seemed like an opportunity. And I wrote my congressman, and the response that I got back was, in a word, just weak. And I don't see anything else different happening across the country. You know, my understanding is that Congress really doesn't do much until their constituency presses them. So for all your listeners and anybody that's hearing this, I would suggest that you lean on them as much as possible, because in America, it is your obligation. In a democracy, it is your obligation to be engaged in the process. Okay? When we disengage, that's when we lose control. And I think that's what we're dealing with right now. Because not enough of the 350 million or some people that are living in this country are actively engaged with their congressmen or their political system whatsoever. And, I hope I'm not going too far off base here, but once again, I guess I would put Congress right there in the same group as the media. It's just plain shameful. There are a few of them, however, maybe not from Congress, but Senator Kristen Gillibrand, who's also from New York. She has at least been vocal about trying to get the 9/11 first responders some help from Congress. Get some resources funded and approved so that we can get these men and women some help, which they have needed for 14 years now. And there's only a few, though, is my point. So once again, all I can say is just plain shameful.
No, I agree with you. I mean, I've fought this for so long, it's kind of old hat right now. The congressmen and their offices remind me of those artificial intelligences that you find on the internet, like conversation bots. They may have a limited vocabulary or a limited bag of little phrases that they can throw at you. So it looks for like certain keywords. Hello, my name is, and then but you ask it something complicated, and it just gives you something that has absolutely nothing to do with what you're talking about because it's limited. And I can understand why they can't look at every single personal issue, but this is not a personal issue. I mean, we've got tons and tons of people, victims, family members, first responders. There are people in the military who do support us. These people are asking legitimate questions. I mean, not to mention the over 2,000 building experts that have signed the Ae911 Truth petition. So even if they can't look at a single individual's email, they can still look at the overall issue, and they are all aware of it. They've gotten a copy of Beyond Misinformation, but it's not just the booklet that we just printed. We've been at this for years. We've got all sorts of correspondence with these people, so they know about it. I know this. There was a guy running for Congress in my district. His name escapes me at the moment. He was running against Richard Hanna in the last election. And when I said what group I was from during a Q&A session at a town hall, you could see his face, the way his face looked. He knew who we were, so he can't claim ignorance. And then he tried to do everything he could to avoid talking to me. Funny enough, he did have to talk to me at the end because I just kind of waited around. And then when I asked him what specifically about our evidence he disagrees with, you know what he said? He said, "Please don't do this to me." Man, I felt 10 feet tall. So, no, you can. They're so afraid of you. I see this with the presidential candidates. I mean, they're absolutely afraid of the people that they want to govern. So we have so much power, we just choose not to use it. All right, you have so much power just by asking them a simple question about physics and common sense. We saw this on C-SPAN. So everybody listening to this broadcast right now should be doing exactly what Josh is telling you to do. Contact your Congress. Go out to the town halls and all of the campaign stops. I know that it's difficult because they don't announce where they're going to be going. God forbid that you might find them and ask them a real question at these things. But do your best and try to confront them with this evidence. Be factual, have your facts straight, and don't ramble off into a million other side issues, because if they can, they're going to find one of those side issues that's easier for them to handle and just talk about that. I know all of their tricks. They're not that bright here. I mean, it's not like they've got a whole big arsenal that we can't counter. You just have to stay on task, stay focused, and stick to the facts, and you'll do great. So yeah, I agree with you 100%. So, you're volunteering with us. You're obviously passionate about it. What's your biggest fear if we don't expose the truth about what happened to those buildings in New York on 9/11? If we just let everything go as usual, status quo, and let this truth not be acknowledged by our government?
Wow. That might be one of the hardest questions I've ever been asked. And I do like to think I have done my homework on this issue, but that one question, what is my greatest fear, really? That's hard to answer, Randy. To be perfectly honest with you, I just woke up to this whole issue in the past year of my life. And I've been through a full range of emotions, trying to cope with it and trying to find a realistic way of dealing with it. That includes dealing with people and talking to people that I care about, friends and family, about the issue. And my greatest fear, is that the public never wakes up. That would be my greatest fear. If we can't communicate to our fellow neighbors, friends, family, everybody, the very basics of this issue, and get them to be active, involved, and asking or demanding a proper investigation, I don't know where it would take us, and I hate to speculate, but my greatest fear is that, those that I'm closest to or anybody around me would just never be aware of the issue. And I think there is some evidence to support we are waking up a few here and there. I know it's frustrating, and it's a slow process, but if we can't get these basics out to people, then I'm not sure where it's taking us. I don't want to speculate any further.
You worked on the mailing with us. There's an article out there talking about that, and people could read that at Ae911 Truth. And you busted your butt for a couple of months there, I think it was, trying to find names off of the internet of the people who worked on the NIST and FEMA reports. And it wasn't no easy task, because it's not like they're all just listed there on a page with all their contact info. If one of them happens to take an interest and listens to this broadcast tonight, one of those people that we mailed the booklet out to, what would you say to them? What would be your hope for them in getting that booklet and taking in that information and their responsibility to do something? What would you hope for them to do as a result of getting that booklet?
Well, in moments like that, I tend to have to kind of pinch myself, because I have to do this with myself sometimes. Sometimes things get a little crazy, and you have to keep reminding yourself that yes, this is real, and it's a reality that has to be dealt with. And I guess if I was going to talk to them, first and foremost, I would, if they had any doubts, go back and study the footage of the towers collapsing themselves. Because to me, that is some of the strongest evidence we have. It's literal visual footage of these towers collapsing. And when you go back and you look at these things and you see the way these buildings came apart, it becomes more and more clear what actually happened. And I guess what I would ask of them is that they wake up and they find the strength to go and talk to their constituency or the rest of the company that they're working with, because our mailing went to a variety of different types of people. But they would find the strength to go and talk to them honestly and just try to do what they can as an individual. Everybody has their limitations, including myself, okay? But the impression that I get is that the majority of the people that booklet went out to, their capabilities are far greater than mine, okay, with respect to the amount of people that they can reach and the amount of credibility they have. And I say that last part lightly because a number of the people that booklet went out to was NIST. And as we all know, they're not all that credible. Anyways, that being said, I would just simply ask them to wake up and face facts. I mean, some of this stuff is so blatant. I mean, that's the problem that I find with 9/11, and it's almost comical if you could take all the pain and frustration out of it. But it's not even a good lie. It's as simple as that. This isn't even a good lie. There's too many fundamentals here that could be used for the betterment of human development. We're right on the cusp. And we got to keep pushing the rock upwards and hope it rolls back down the other side.
How about the people out there who are just regular folks like you and I who just, they want to do something, they don't know what they can do, they may feel powerless. What kind of words of inspiration do you have, or just little things they can do well every day to get the word out, advice you can offer to them who may be listening to this show?
First and foremost, I would say that before you even start talking to other people, make sure you've done your homework. And I'm not talking about just watching a few videos on YouTube. I'm talking about really backing up what you're talking about. And the architects and engineers have done a very good job of putting some solid physical, chemical, and video evidence out there. And these are the kinds of things that you need to be able to reference. These are the kinds of things that you need to be able to deal with. And, beyond that, when it does come to talking to other people, I would just try to approach them softly and ask more questions than you do tell them things. Get their own minds working would be my suggestion. Okay? Get them to be the ones that are curious and are willing to go out and do their own homework. After that, the only other thing I could say is, because I've come close a couple of times myself, is, and it may be cliche to say this, but, don't give up, because a businessman once put it to me, a terrible thing happens when you don't advertise, and that's nothing. Nothing happens. So if average people like you and I, Andy, or anybody out there listening isn't out there actually trying to help educate the public, then nothing will happen. This issue will become stagnant, and it will not be followed up on. And that, getting back to your earlier question, is probably one of my greatest fears, because I don't know how bad it would get after that.
Josh Ewing, thank you so much for coming on 911 Freefall.
Absolutely, brother. Anytime, man.
This program's on every Thursday night on No Lies Radio at 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Pacific. You can also download MP3s of this show from the Internet Archive by going to 911freefall.com. This is Andy Steele saying have a great week and good luck.